Mr. Malik smiled, a genuine, warm smile that lit up his face. I knew you would, Ellie. You've made the right choice. This is just the beginning of a new chapter in your life. Ali felt a mix of excitement and nervousness, but the fear that had gripped him earlier seemed to fade. He was ready to take that step, and for the first time in his life, he felt like he wasn't just dreaming about a better future, he was about to make it happen. I'll support you every step of the way, Mr. Malik added. But remember, success isn't just about the destination. It's about how you get there. Always stay grounded. Always remember where you came from. Ellie smiled, feeling a sense of pride swelling inside him. He had made a decision that would change his life forever. He didn't know exactly where this new path would lead, but he knew one thing. He was ready to face whatever challenges came his way. As Ali stood up to leave, Mr. Malik shook his hand firmly. Good luck, Ali. I'll be watching, but I have no doubt you'll succeed. Ali walked out of the study, his heart lighter than it had been in hours. As he stepped outside into the cool night air, he looked up at the stars above. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he was no longer afraid. He was ready for it. It was a busy afternoon at the city train station. People rushed everywhere, men in suits, women with shopping bags, families, tourists. Everyone was busy. Everyone was in a hurry. But no one noticed the small boy sitting on the corner bench. His name was Jalen. He was 12 years old. He wore an old red hoodie, jeans with small holes, and dusty sneakers. He held a backpack on his lap and looked around with quiet eyes. Jalen didn't talk. He didn't ask for anything. He just sat and watched. Many people passed him. Some looked at him and turned their faces away. Some whispered, "Why is that boy sitting here alone?" But no one spoke to him. No one smiled at him. No one cared. Jalen was used to it. He was not angry, not sad, just quiet. He looked at the clock. His train would come in 30 minutes. He was going to visit his grandmother, who lived 2 towns away. He had saved the money from doing small chores in his neighborhood, washing cars, carrying groceries, and cleaning yards. Jalen had a kind heart, but the world didn't notice until that moment. On the other side of the platform, an old blind man walked slowly, tapping his cane on the floor. He moved carefully, listening to the sounds around him. People walked past him, busy with their phones and bags. Suddenly, the man's wallet slipped from his coat pocket and fell to the ground. No one saw it. No one, except Jalen. Jalen stood up quickly and picked up the wallet. It was thick and full, maybe the man's life savings. He looked around. No one else had noticed. No one had stopped. Jalen ran across the platform. "Sir," he called out. "Sir, you dropped your wallet." The old man turned his head, confused. Jalen gently placed the wallet in his hand. The man touched it and gasped. Oh, thank you, child. Thank you." Jalen smiled. "It's okay. Be careful." Then he turned and walked back to his seat. No one clapped. No one cheered. People were still walking, still scrolling, still talking. Jalen sat down again and pulled out his sandwich. It was cold now, but he didn't mind. He took a small bite and looked out at the trains. But what Jalen didn't know was, someone had seen everything. Far across the station, a man in a black suit sat alone on a bench. He looked important. His shoes were clean, his watch shiny, his face calm. He had seen Jalen from the moment he entered the station. He watched the people ignore him. He saw Jalen help the blind man. And now he sat quietly, still watching the boy eat his cold sandwich. The man opened a notebook and wrote something down. Then he made a phone call. "I found him," he said. The voice on the other side replied, "Found who?" The man said softly, "A boy who gives, even when no one looks. I want to know everything about him." He ended the call and kept watching Jalen. Something in his eyes said he wasn't done yet. Jalen finished his sandwich and leaned back. His train would arrive soon. He didn't know that his life was about to change. He didn't know that someone had noticed his kindness. He didn't know that someone was watching, not with judgment, but with respect. And that person had power, money, and a reason. Jalen stood up and stretched his arms. His train was still 15 minutes away, so he had time to think. He looked around again. The station was crowded, but it felt empty to him. People rushed by, talking to each other, laughing or arguing. They never noticed him. But Jalen didn't mind. He was used to being invisible. He checked his phone. There was no message, not that he expected any. He turned off the phone and slipped it back into his pocket. It was old. His mother had given it to him when she could afford to buy a new one. Jalen never complained about his things. His shoes were worn out, but he still wore them. His hoodie was faded, but it kept him warm. Jalen didn't ask for much. All he wanted was to help others, but no one noticed. At home, life wasn't easy. Jalen lived with his grandmother, a kind woman who had raised him after his mother had to work 2 jobs. His father had left when he was a baby, and Jalen had never met him. His mother was always busy, working hard to make sure Jalen had enough to eat and a place to sleep, but there was never extra. Jalen's grandmother, Nana, was old. She had a bad back and tired legs, but she always smiled. She always tried her best. Every day, she would sit on the couch, crocheting blankets and telling Jalen stories about his mother when she was young. "She was just like you, Jalen," Nana would say. She cared about people. She always helped others, even when she had nothing. Jalen would smile, but he never told Nana how much it hurt to see other kids with things he couldn't have. New shoes, new clothes, a phone with games. His friends at school often made fun of him. They laughed at his old clothes and worn sneakers. But Jalen never fought back. He didn't tell Nana how hard it was to be poor. He didn't want to hurt her feelings. Instead, he would stay quiet and help people when he could. In school, he carried bags for teachers. He helped younger kids find their classrooms. On the way home, he picked up trash and threw it away. Even when no one said thank you, he kept going. It didn't matter. He was doing the right thing. But it was hard. So hard sometimes. The man in the black suit had finished his phone call. He stood up and walked around the station for a few minutes. He wasn't in a hurry. He had seen something special in Jalen, and he wanted to know why. He had noticed how Jalen helped the old blind man. He had seen how Jalen didn't care that no one noticed him, how he still smiled, even when the world ignored him. The man in the black suit was Mr. Anderson, a billionaire with a large company. But he wasn't interested in money today. He was interested in Jalen. Mr. Anderson had been rich for years. He had everything he wanted: big houses, expensive cars, and fancy clothes. But he wasn't happy. He had everything, but no one ever taught him how to be kind or how to love people without expecting something in return. He knew what it was like to feel alone, even in a crowd. Jalen's train arrived, and he got on, finding a seat by the window. The train started moving, and he looked outside, watching the city go by. He thought about his grandmother and how excited she would be to see him. She always smiled when he came home, but she never asked him about his day. She never made him feel bad for not having fancy things. She just wanted to be with him. Jalen closed his eyes and thought about the last time he saw her. She had given him a hug, kissed his forehead, and told him to be safe. "I'll see you soon, Nana," he whispered quietly to himself. The train ride was peaceful. The noise of the world outside seemed far away. Meanwhile, Mr. Anderson sat at his desk, flipping through some papers. He was planning something, but his mind kept going back to Jalen. He thought about the boy's actions, the way Jalen helped the blind man, the way he never looked for attention, and the way he smiled even when life was tough. It reminded him of something he had forgotten: how to be good. Mr. Anderson's assistant walked into his office. "Sir, the report is ready." He looked up and nodded, but his mind was still on Jalen. He picked up his phone again. "Call the private investigator I hired. I want everything about that boy, Jalen." Back on the train, Jalen looked down at his backpack. It was heavy, full of school books, but it didn't bother him. He didn't mind carrying heavy things as long as he could help. As the train sped down the tracks, Jalen thought about the future. He didn't know what it would look like, but he was okay with that. He would keep helping people. He would keep doing what was right, even if no one noticed. The next morning, Jalen woke up early. His grandmother was already sitting at the kitchen table, sipping her tea. The sun had just started to rise, and the soft light filled the small room. "Good morning, Nana," Jalen said, rubbing his eyes as he walked in. "Good morning, my boy," Nana replied, her voice warm and kind. "How did you sleep?" "I slept okay," Jalen answered, sitting down beside her. "What are we having for breakfast?" "Your favorite," Nana smiled. "Pancakes with syrup." Jalen's face lit up. "Thanks, Nana." They ate together in silence, the sound of the fork against the plate the only noise in the small kitchen. Jalen finished his breakfast quickly, ready to start his day. He didn't want to be late for school. When he stood up to leave, Nana called after him. "Jalen, don't forget, you're meeting your friend, Marcus, after school today. He needs help with his math homework." "I won't forget, Nana," Jalen said, grabbing his backpack. "I'll be back soon." He waved goodbye to his grandmother and stepped out of the house, the cool air hitting his face. The day was quiet, the streets empty except for a few cars passing by. Jalen didn't mind walking alone. He had grown used to it. At school, the day started like any other. The bell rang, and students shuffled into their classrooms, talking and laughing. Jalen sat quietly in his seat, listening to the teacher explain the math lesson. Most of the kids in his class ignored him. They always did, but that didn't bother him. He didn't need attention. He was just there to learn. During lunch, Jalen sat by himself in the corner of the cafeteria. He pulled out his sandwich and took a bite, watching the other kids eat and talk with their friends. Suddenly, a loud voice broke the silence. "Hey, Jalen." Jalen looked up. It was Marcus, a classmate who had been his friend for a long time. Marcus was one of the few kids who didn't ignore Jalen. They had been through a lot together, and even though Marcus was sometimes teased for being quiet, they both understood each other. "Hi, Marcus," Jalen said with a smile. "Can I sit with you today?" Marcus asked, pointing to the empty seat across from Jalen. "Of course," Jalen replied. Marcus sat down, and the two of them began talking. Jalen could see that Marcus was struggling to focus on the conversation. His eyes kept darting to the other kids laughing and chatting. "Hey, Jalen," Marcus said quietly, his voice full of hesitation. "Do you ever wonder why people ignore us? I mean, you're always so nice to everyone, but they don't seem to care." Jalen looked at Marcus for a long time before answering. He didn't really have an answer, but he had thought about it a lot. He shrugged. "I guess people are busy with their own lives," Jalen said. "They don't really see the small things, like helping someone or being kind. They only care about what they can see on the outside." Marcus nodded, his face thoughtful. "Yeah, I guess that's true." Just then, Jalen noticed a girl from his class, Sarah, walking past their table. She dropped her tray of food, and the food spilled everywhere. Everyone around her just laughed and pointed. But Jalen didn't laugh. He stood up and quickly grabbed some napkins from the table. "I got it," he said, walking over to Sarah. "Let me help you." Sarah looked surprised, but she didn't say anything. She just stood there as Jalen carefully cleaned up the mess. Other kids watched, but no one offered to help. They just stared. When Jalen finished, he smiled at Sarah. "Don't worry about it. Accidents happen." Sarah's face softened, "Thanks, Jalen," she said quietly. Jalen sat back down at his table, feeling good. It wasn't about getting attention or praise. It was about doing what was right. Marcus smiled at him. "You always do the right thing, Jalen, even when no one else does." Jalen shrugged. "I just want to make things better, even if no one notices." After school, Jalen met up with Marcus again. They sat on the curb outside the school building, and Marcus pulled out his math notebook. "Okay, let's get started," Marcus said. "I'm struggling with these word problems. I don't get them at all." Jalen looked at the problems and nodded. "I can help you. You just have to break it down step by step." They spent the next hour working together, Jalen patiently explaining each problem. It wasn't easy, but Marcus was grateful for Jalen's help. "I don't know what I'd do without you, man," Marcus said after they finished. "You're always there when I need you." Jalen smiled. "That's what friends are for." As they said their goodbyes, Jalen walked home slowly, thinking about everything. He had helped Marcus. He had helped Sarah. He had done good things, even though no one had noticed. But that was okay. He didn't need anyone to notice. When he reached home, Nana was sitting in her usual spot, waiting for him. She smiled when she saw him. "Did you have a good day, Jalen?" "Yeah, Nana," Jalen replied, dropping his backpack beside the door. It was a good day. He didn't mention the things he had done. He didn't need to. He sat down beside his grandmother, feeling content. The world might not notice him, but he knew what mattered. Meanwhile, Mr. Anderson was once again watching from afar. He had seen everything. Jalen helping the girl, Jalen helping his friend, and Jalen's quiet kindness. This boy, Jalen, was different, and Mr. Anderson knew that he couldn't let him go unnoticed anymore. The next few days passed by, and Jalen continued his usual routine. He went to school, helped his friends, and returned home to his grandmother. Every day seemed the same, and though Jalen never minded the quiet life, he couldn't help but feel there was something more waiting for him. But little did Jalen know, someone was watching him. Someone who had noticed his quiet acts of kindness and was determined to change his life forever. In a large glass-walled office on the top floor of a shiny building downtown, Mr. Anderson sat behind his desk. He looked out at the city below, deep in thought. The sky outside was overcast, but that didn't matter. His mind was focused on only one thing, Jalen. Mr. Anderson had been watching Jalen for weeks now. It had started with a single act of kindness, the boy helping an old blind man at the train station. But as he observed, he began to see something deeper. Jalen was always helping others, always putting others first, without asking for anything in return. In a world filled with selfishness, Mr. Anderson saw something pure in Jalen. But there was more. Mr. Anderson had also learned that Jalen was poor. He lived in a small house with his elderly grandmother. Jalen didn't have the newest clothes or the latest gadgets, but he didn't care. He was happy with what he had. That was what impressed Mr. Anderson the most. He had everything, money, power, and influence, but he was missing something. He couldn't quite explain it, but it was something he had seen in Jalen. It was something pure, something good. That afternoon, Mr. Anderson made a call. His voice was calm, but there was a sense of urgency. "I need you to find out everything you can about a boy named Jalen," he said. "I want to know where he lives, who his family is, and what his story is. Leave no stone unturned." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Understood, sir," the voice replied. Mr. Anderson hung up the phone and leaned back in his chair. He had made up his mind. He would help Jalen. But how? Meanwhile, Jalen was unaware of the growing interest in his life. He was sitting in his room, doing his homework. His grandmother had fallen asleep on the couch, and the house was quiet. He could hear the wind rustling outside, the occasional car passing by. But other than that, the world felt still. Jalen loved these quiet moments. They gave him time to think. He thought about his friends, Marcus, and how he had helped him with math. He thought about Sarah, the girl he helped in the cafeteria, and how she had smiled at him afterward. He thought about his grandmother and how she always made him feel loved, no matter how little they had. But sometimes, Jalen couldn't help but wonder if he would ever have more. He didn't need anything fancy, but it would be nice to have things that didn't wear out. It would be nice to not have to worry about what he'd eat tomorrow or if the lights would stay on. But Jalen didn't complain. He never did. He believed that doing good was its own reward, even if no one noticed. That evening, as Jalen sat at the kitchen table eating a simple dinner of beans and rice, there was a knock at the door. Jalen stood up and opened it. Standing in front of him was a tall man, dressed in a suit. His face was serious but kind. "Hello, Jalen," the man said with a warm smile. "My name is Mr. Anderson. I'm someone who has been watching you for some time now." Jalen's eyes widened. He had never seen this man before. Why was he here? "Are you okay, Jalen?" Mr. Anderson asked, sensing the boy's confusion. "I promise I'm not here to make trouble. I've been following your story, and I want to help you." Jalen didn't know what to say. He just stared at the man, unsure of what was happening. Was this some kind of joke? "I know this may seem strange, but hear me out," Mr. Anderson continued. "I've seen how you treat people, how you always help others, no matter what. Most people ignore the small things, but you don't. You're a rare person, Jalen, and I want to offer you an opportunity, a chance for a better life." Jalen still didn't speak. He didn't know if he could trust this man, but the way Mr. Anderson spoke made him feel like he could. "I don't know if you know this," Mr. Anderson said, "but I run a business, and we're looking for someone like you. Someone with a big heart, someone who can teach others how to be kind, like you do." Jalen was confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Mr. Anderson said, "that I want to offer you a scholarship, a chance to attend a private school, a place where you can get an education, a place where you can grow. No more worrying about how you're going to afford school. No more struggling." Jalen's heart raced. A private school. He couldn't even imagine going to one. It felt like a dream. "But," Jalen started, looking at his grandmother sleeping in the next room, "I don't know if we can accept. My grandmother is old, and we don't have much." Mr. Anderson smiled. "I'm offering to help with everything, Jalen. The tuition, the books, even helping with your grandmother's needs. I want to make sure you have everything you need to succeed." Jalen couldn't believe it. Was this real? "I promise," Mr. Anderson said, "that if you give me a chance, I will give you everything you need to make your dreams come true. You don't have to stay stuck in the cycle of struggling. You have the potential to do amazing things." Jalen was quiet for a long time, thinking. His grandmother's health wasn't great, and the money they had was never enough. But this man, Mr. Anderson, seemed genuine. And this could be a chance, a real chance, for a better life. He looked at Mr. Anderson and nodded slowly. "Okay," Jalen said. "I'll do it. I'll accept." Mr. Anderson's face lit up with a smile. "You won't regret this, Jalen. I'll take care of everything from here." As Mr. Anderson left, Jalen stood at the door, staring into the night. He couldn't believe it. His life was about to change. But as he looked back inside at his grandmother, who was still sleeping peacefully, Jalen made a promise to himself. No matter how much his life changed, he would never stop being the person he was. He would never stop helping others, no matter what. The next few weeks were a blur for Jalen. His life had completely changed, and every day felt like something out of a dream. After Mr. Anderson's visit, everything seemed to move quickly. Mr. Anderson took care of everything. School fees, uniforms, books, even the transportation. Jalen's first day at the new school arrived, and he was both excited and nervous. He had never been to a school like this before. This school was big, and the students all looked different from the ones he was used to. When Jalen walked through the gates of the private school, he was amazed. The buildings were tall and beautiful, and everything seemed so perfect. There were big windows, shiny floors, and perfectly manicured lawns. Everything looked like it belonged in a movie. But it didn't take long for Jalen to feel out of place. The other students walked in groups, laughing and talking about their expensive vacations and the latest fashion trends. Jalen felt small and invisible again. He didn't know anyone, and he didn't have anything in common with these kids. His clothes were different, and he didn't have the latest gadgets. He was used to being the one who helped others, but now he felt like he needed help. Still, he couldn't let himself give up. Jalen remembered his promise to himself. No matter how different things were, he would never stop being who he was. So, he tried his best to fit in. He did his homework diligently, asked questions in class, and helped the students who seemed lost. But the first few weeks weren't easy. Jalen felt like an outsider. At lunch, he sat alone at a table in the back of the cafeteria. The other students barely looked his way. He couldn't help but wonder if he had made the right choice. Maybe he didn't belong here. One afternoon, as Jalen sat alone, picking at his food, a voice broke the silence. "Hey, you're Jalen, right?" Jalen looked up and saw a girl standing in front of his table. She had long brown hair and bright eyes. She was one of the students in his class, but he hadn't spoken to her much. "Yeah, that's me," Jalen said, surprised. "I'm Emily," she said with a smile. "I saw you helping that new kid last week with his locker. You're pretty nice." Jalen blinked. He had helped the new kid, but no one had seemed to notice. The fact that Emily had seen him made him feel a little better. "Thanks," Jalen said, smiling shyly. Emily sat down across from him. "Mind if I join you?" Jalen was surprised, but he nodded. "Sure." They started talking. Emily told Jalen about her life, her family, and her love for art. Jalen listened carefully, and before long, they were laughing about silly things and sharing stories. Emily had a kind heart, and Jalen felt like she was someone he could trust. As the days went by, Jalen started to feel more comfortable. Emily introduced him to some of her friends, and although they were a little different from him, they were kind. Slowly, Jalen found a small group of people who accepted him for who he was. They didn't care that he didn't have the newest phone or the trendiest clothes. They saw him for his heart, the same heart that had always led him to help others. Meanwhile, Mr. Anderson watched from the shadows. He had kept an eye on Jalen, just as he promised, but he didn't want to interfere too much. He wanted Jalen to grow on his own, to find his own way in this new world. However, he was glad to see that Jalen was starting to make friends. He knew it wasn't easy. One afternoon after school, Mr. Anderson invited Jalen to his office. Jalen had been nervous about the meeting, but when he arrived, Mr. Anderson greeted him warmly. "Jalen, come in," Mr. Anderson said, smiling. "How's everything going?" Jalen sat down, feeling a bit uneasy. It's okay. It's just hard. I don't feel like I fit in." Mr. Anderson nodded. "I understand. It's not easy to suddenly change your life, but remember this, you are different for a reason. The kindness you've shown to others, your willingness to help, those things matter more than anything else." Jalen looked down at his hands, unsure of what to say. "But no one really cares. They don't notice me." "That's not true," Mr. Anderson said gently. "There are always people who notice. It might take time, but the right people will see your heart. Trust me." Jalen thought about those words for a long time. Maybe Mr. Anderson was right. Maybe he didn't have to change who he was to fit in. Maybe the people who mattered would see him for who he truly was, just like Emily had. As the weeks passed, Jalen grew more confident. He started joining in class discussions, helping his classmates with projects, and volunteering for school events. Slowly, the students began to notice him. They saw that he wasn't just a quiet boy sitting at the back of the class. He was someone who cared. He was someone who always tried to make things better. One day, Emily invited Jalen to an art show at the school. She had been working on a project for weeks, and she wanted him to see it. Jalen was touched by the invitation. Emily's friendship had been the light that helped him feel less alone. When he walked into the art show, he was amazed at the creativity on display. Students had painted, sculpted, and drawn their feelings. Emily's work was on a large canvas at the center of the room. It was a picture of two people, holding hands, surrounded by bright colors and flowers. The title of the piece was Unity in Diversity. "This is amazing, Emily," Jalen said, admiring the painting. "You really captured something special." "Thanks," Emily said, beaming. "I wanted to show that no matter where we come from, we all have something beautiful to share." Jalen smiled, feeling a warmth inside. Maybe he hadn't found a perfect place yet, but he was starting to understand. His life wasn't about fitting into the world around him. It was about making the world fit him. That evening, Jalen went home and sat beside his grandmother, feeling grateful for everything he had. "Nana," Jalen said softly, "I think I'm starting to find my place." Nana looked up from her knitting and smiled. "I'm proud of you, Jalen. I always knew you'd find your way." Jalen smiled back, feeling at peace. He had a long road ahead of him, but he was no longer afraid of it. The months flew by, and Jalen's life at the new school began to feel more normal. He was no longer the quiet boy sitting alone in the back of the cafeteria. He had friends now, people who respected him for who he was. His grades were good, and he even started participating in activities, like volunteering for community service projects. Things were looking up. But no matter how much he tried to fit in, there were still moments when Jalen felt like he didn't belong. It wasn't the school or his friends. It was something deeper. It was him. Sometimes he still felt like an outsider, like the world around him was too different from the life he had known. One afternoon, after a long day of classes, Jalen sat by himself in the schoolyard, staring at the ground. His friends were busy playing basketball nearby, but Jalen didn't feel like joining. Instead, he watched them from a distance. They were laughing, joking, and having fun, but something inside him felt empty. What was wrong with me? Jalen thought. I have everything I wanted. I have friends, a chance for a better life, and I'm doing well in school. Why do I still feel like this? His mind raced with doubt. Maybe it was because of how different everything was. Maybe it was because he didn't come from a rich family. Maybe it was because he was still that boy from the streets, still trying to catch up with a world that didn't seem to make sense to him. As he sat there, lost in his thoughts, someone sat down next to him. It was Emily. "Hey," she said softly. "Mind if I sit here?" Jalen smiled weakly. "No, of course not." Emily looked at him carefully. "You've been kind of quiet lately. Everything okay?" Jalen shrugged, trying to hide the feelings that had been bubbling inside him. "I guess so. I don't know. I feel like I'm still not part of all this, you know. I don't know how to explain it." Emily was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then she spoke in a calm voice. "You don't have to explain it to me if you don't want to. But I think I understand. It's hard to be in a new place with people who don't know where you've come from. It's easy to feel like you're not good enough or like you don't fit in." Jalen looked at her, surprised that she understood. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That's exactly it. I've come a long way, but I still feel like I'm out of place." Emily nodded. "It's okay to feel that way sometimes. It doesn't mean you're not doing well or that you're not good enough. It just means you're still finding your way." Jalen let her words sink in. He had always been the kind of person to focus on what he could do for others, never really thinking about how he was feeling. But now, in this new world, he wasn't sure where he fit. "I guess I just don't want to let anyone down," Jalen admitted. "I don't want to lose this chance. I've worked so hard to get here, and I don't want to mess it up." Emily gave him a reassuring smile. "You're not going to mess it up, Jalen. You're already doing great. You don't have to be perfect. No one expects you to be. You're enough just as you are. Jalen felt a weight lift off his chest. She's right, he thought. I don't have to be perfect. I just need to be me. As they sat together, Jalen realized that it was okay to have doubts. It was okay to feel unsure sometimes. What mattered was that he kept going, kept being the person who helped others, who cared, and who never gave up. That evening, as Jalen sat at the kitchen table doing his homework, his grandmother looked up from her knitting. She had been quiet for a while, but Jalen could tell she had something on her mind. "Jalen," she said, her voice soft but firm, "I can see that you've been working hard. You've come so far, my boy. But I want you to know something. No matter how far you go, no matter what you achieve, you'll always be enough. Don't ever forget that." Jalen looked at his grandmother, feeling a deep sense of love and gratitude. "Thanks, Nana. I won't forget." As the days went on, Jalen started to believe it more. He began to feel more at ease in his new life. He still faced challenges, but now he knew that he wasn't alone. He had his friends, his grandmother, and people who cared about him. And most importantly, he had himself. One morning, as Jalen was getting ready for school, he received a message from Mr. Anderson. It was brief, just a reminder to keep up the good work. But for some reason, that small message meant a lot to him. Mr. Anderson had believed in him from the start. He had given Jalen a chance when no one else had. And now, Jalen realized that he needed to believe in himself the same way. He didn't have to be someone else. He didn't have to pretend to be perfect. All he needed to do was keep being the kind, caring person he had always been. The end of the school year arrived faster than Jalen had expected. He looked back on everything that had happened, the new friends he made, the lessons he learned, and the changes he had gone through. It felt like a lifetime since he had first walked into the school, unsure of himself and his place. Now, Jalen was a different person. He had grown stronger, more confident, and most importantly, he had found a sense of belonging. But there was one thing that still weighed on Jalen's mind. Even though he had come so far, he still didn't feel like he had truly earned his place at the school. It wasn't about the grades or the friendships. It was about something deeper. Was he really deserving of all this? Was he just lucky, or had he worked hard enough to deserve the new life he was living? One afternoon, as Jalen was walking home from school, he heard a familiar voice calling his name. He turned around to see Mr. Anderson standing by his car, smiling. "Jalen," Mr. Anderson said, waving him over. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" Jalen walked over, curious. "Of course, Mr. Anderson. What's up?" Mr. Anderson opened the car door and gestured for Jalen to sit inside. "I've been watching you for a while now," he said, his tone warm. "And I have to say, I'm incredibly proud of you." Jalen sat down, feeling a little uncomfortable. "Proud of me? For what?" "For everything you've done," Mr. Anderson said. "You came to this school as an outsider, unsure of yourself. You faced doubts, challenges, and a world that was different from what you knew. But you never gave up. You kept being yourself, kept helping others, and kept pushing forward. That's not something everyone can do." Jalen felt his heart swell at Mr. Anderson's words. He had never really thought about it that way. To him, it had just been the right thing to do. Helping others and staying true to himself was all he knew. "But that's not all," Mr. Anderson continued. "You've had an impact here, Jalen. People notice you, and not just because of your kindness. It's because of who you are. You inspire others. You've shown them that it's not about where you come from or what you have. It's about who you are on the inside." Jalen didn't know how to respond. He had never seen himself as an inspiration to anyone. He had just been trying to get by, to make the best of his situation. But hearing Mr. Anderson say it out loud made him realize how much his journey had meant to others too. "You've earned your place here, Jalen," Mr. Anderson said, his voice soft but firm. "You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You're here because you belong. and I want you to remember that." Jalen nodded, the words sinking deep into his heart. For the first time, he truly believed them. He had worked hard to get here, and he had earned every step of the way. That night, as Jalen sat at the dinner table with his grandmother, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. Nana looked at him and smiled, as if she knew exactly what was on his mind. "I think you finally figured it out," she said, setting down her knitting. Jalen smiled back, his heart full. "Yeah, Nana, I think I have." Later, as Jalen prepared for bed, he took one last look at the world outside his window. It was a quiet night, the stars shining brightly above. Jalen had come so far. He had faced doubts and fears, but he had kept going, one step at a time. He had learned that life wasn't about fitting in, about being like everyone else. It was about being true to himself, no matter what. He had learned that kindness, hard work, and determination mattered more than anything else. And most importantly, he had learned that he was enough. The next morning, Jalen woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. It was the last day of school, and the thought of summer break excited him. But there was something else that filled him with excitement: the future. Jalen knew that his journey wasn't over. There would be more challenges, more moments of doubt, and more obstacles to face. But he wasn't afraid anymore. He knew that, no matter what came his way, he had the strength to handle it. As Jalen walked to school, he smiled to himself. The world around him still felt different, but it didn't matter anymore. He had found his place, and he was ready for whatever came next. At school, the final bell rang, signaling the end of the year. As the students poured out of the classrooms, Jalen stood in the courtyard, looking around at all the faces. He saw Emily waving at him, and he waved back with a smile. Before he could say anything, Emily walked over, holding a small envelope in her hand. "I have something for you," she said, handing him the envelope. "It's a thank you card from all of us, for everything you've done this year." Jalen opened the envelope and read the card. It was filled with messages from his classmates, thank you notes for his kindness, his hard work, and his willingness to always lend a hand. The last note was from Emily, and it read, "You showed us all that being kind is more important than anything else. Thank you for being you." Jalen felt a lump in his throat as he looked at the card. He had never expected anything like this. To him, helping others had always been the right thing to do. But now he realized that his actions had made a difference. His kindness had touched more lives than he ever knew. "Thank you," Jalen said, his voice filled with emotion. "I didn't do it for anything like this. I just wanted to make things better. But I appreciate it." Emily smiled and gave him a hug. "You've done more than make things better. You've changed all of us."